paying attention to and care about their mental health more than ever before. You might not see it with all of the bad headlines, but we actually have more tools and more knowledge about mental health than ever before. It's really amazing when you see people get quite engaged with their mental health, the radical changes and improvements that they can make. And at the same time, we're up against new challenges for your brain, whether it's a diet that's consisting of ultra-processed foods, or whether it's all the metabolic dysfunction and challenges that we're seeing, or whether it's the screen time or all the new microplastics floating around in your brain. There's just new stuff that we're up against. And the more that you know, the more you can take care of your mental health. And so that kind of answers the why now.
Hello, Dr. Ramsey. You are a board-certified psychiatrist and psychotherapist, and the author of 5 books, most recently Healing the Modern Brain, 9 Tenets to Build Mental Fitness and Revitalize Your Brain, Your Mind. So welcome to Modern Healthspan, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Richard, thank you. Thank you for everyone who's listening. I'm very excited to talk about mental fitness with you. I think one of the most important aspects of aging well.
Thank you. It is, and it's overlooked, or it's not. Yeah, it's overlooked, I think. And actually, what we'll start with is, what is mental health? Because one of the things I do think about as, this kind of longevity in aging is I think about mental health, but I tend to think of it as like cognitive capacity and memory. And so in a very, I guess, engineering way, but I think your view is kind of wider. So what is mental health to you?
Well, I like the engineering way. I mean, I'm a psychiatrist, so I treat mental health problems. Let's like talk about what I see in terms of the challenges. You're talking about cognitive health, our ability to remember things or execute, make lists, do stuff in our lives. And so we have disorders ranging from issues like mild cognitive impairment to the dementing illnesses to things like attention deficit disorder or some of the neurodivergent disorders where there's a challenge with some cognitive processing, or illnesses like schizophrenia where there can be cognitive issues, or even illnesses that we think about mostly as affective or mood disorders. But a big challenge with mood disorders for people is there can be a big cognitive component, especially when we think about a lot of patients who don't fully recover from depression. Their mood will be a little better, they're sleeping better, but they just, they still feel kind of a cognitive fog. So from an engineering standpoint, I think about mood and mood symptoms, and having a stable, resilient, I would say engaged and optimistic mood. Not all the time, but generally leaning, looking up. Having a mood that it feels like it is appropriately reactive. So classic mood disorders, depression, bipolar disorder. We think about, mental health. Certainly, one of the massive issues that people are struggling with are substance use disorders, whether that's nicotine and alcohol, which are, talked about a little bit more, and or whether all of the new cannabis use disorder concerns, whether it's, hyperemesis or these new statistics coming out with really increased cardiovascular risk and then increased dementia risk for cannabis users as they age. So, but psychiatry really is our ability to work, to love, to function to our full capacity, to use our minds to their full capacity. And one of the things I noticed is that we aren't doing a great job in mental health of helping people understand outside of avoiding us, i.e., not seeing a psychiatrist, not having mental illness. We weren't engaging the public in a way that actually gives you more of a framework, gives you more control, gives you more tools, really. So as you are going through life, that some of the challenges that we're all going to deal with in terms of our mental health, I think you fare better. We can all agree one of the tenets of mental fitness is nutrition. I think we've all been in situations in our life where we're eating really well, we're really dialed in, and we handle stress better, we feel better, we sleep better. We've all had periods where, we're on the fast food or the junk food, or we just haven't prioritized it, and we feel worse. Our self-esteem's worse, we're more sluggish, we're a little more foggy.
So you wrote the book, so you published the book like this year.
Yeah, just
So
a few weeks ago.
in just a few weeks ago. So why the book now? What are the main dangers that we see for mental health, and are they growing?
hmm The book's needed right now because we need more guidance about what to do with our mental health. I'm a psychiatrist. If you're watching the video behind me, that couch, it works. A patient just got off of it a few minutes ago. I was a couple of minutes late to see Richard. And I really enjoy taking care of patients in a mental health setting. I often encounter that there are some things that if people would have known about earlier in their lives, whether it's the new science of nutritional psychiatry, that there's a lot of science between how we eat and what we eat and how it affects our brain and our mental health. If you have that data, let's say, for example, there's a lot of depression in your family. And you learn about some of the research showing that people who eat a more traditional style or whole foods diet, maybe it's a Mediterranean style diet, but there's a lot of data for a Japanese or a Norwegian style diet, but real traditional foods, the risk of getting depression drops by 30+%. There's really powerful data. And so that's an example of like a new piece of scientific knowledge that I find a lot of people haven't heard about. I wanted to give people like a workout for their mental health, right? Everybody knows about physical fitness. And when we talk about your physical health and your heart health and avoiding cancer, like everybody knows some stuff you're supposed to do. When it comes to your mental health and taking care of your mental health, we all have some ideas about what to do, but I'm not sure that all of us feel that we know what's really the most evidence-backed. I'm not sure that sometimes we do such a great job sorting through like the misinformation about mental health. And then I think the part that's really true is just like physical health. We don't usually take enough time or enough attention to really care for our mental health. I find over and over again that people have a lot of the most important components of mental health right in their fingertips, like loving human relationship. But without enough kind of investment and kind of care, and uh, those relationships tend to fray. We see that happen a lot, Richard, with men, right? You're a man who, right now, one of the things you should be worried about is the tenet of connection. As men age, we really tend to get much more isolated. We get dependent on our partners. We kind of some find one reason or another to stop kind of, going out on guys' trips. And over time, more and more men are just isolated without a lot of people they can talk to and trust. That's horrible for your mental health. It like increases your risk of dementia, depression, all the stuff, all the bad stuff. So we really need to be active then, right? Richard and I, and all of you middle-aged and older men that are listening, and we can't just hear that statistic and do nothing about it, right? We have to kind of protect and care for our mental health. So that's what I call mental fitness, right? Us getting in a habit, building some new skills, learning some new knowledge, and it allows us to lead a more mentally sound life, a more enjoyable life.
So the book talks about nine core tenets. So could we just quickly list what those are and give a quick overview of those? Because they actually overlap with healthy aging a fair degree.
I think they do, and I think it's a recipe for healthy aging. And I feel I didn't answer your question, Richard, of like why now,
Mm.
and not to just go back to that, but I think the why now is that people are paying attention to and care about their mental health more than ever before. You might not see it with all of the bad headlines, but we actually have more tools and more knowledge about mental health than ever before. It's really amazing when you see people get quite engaged with their mental health, the radical changes and improvements that they can make. And at the same time, we're up against new challenges for your brain, whether it's a diet that's consisting of ultra processed foods, or whether it's all the metabolic dysfunction and challenges that we're seeing, or whether it's the screen time or all the new microplastics floating around in your brain. There's just new stuff that we're up against. And the more that you know, the more you can take care of your mental health. And so that kind of answers the why now. So where do these tenets come from? Just quickly, they come from things I got tired of arguing. I mean, I'm fine to like have a little conflict. I'm a psychiatrist, right? Confrontation is part of what we do, but I wanted some things that we could all agree on. I learned with nutrition that we can all agree on the simple fact that what we eat affects how we feel. How we nourish ourselves affects our self esteem. How organized we are right? If you're one of these people who's like batch cooking and every Sunday you go to the grocery store, there's a certain feeling of confidence you have with that. And so so these tenets again are things we can agree on. I start with the tenet of self-awareness that you really, until we embrace knowing the self and understanding more about, who we are, what our challenges and patterns are. In the self-awareness chapter, I talk a little bit about adverse childhood events, and I talk about that also in a later tenet. But just really trying to think around your challenges, your stage of life, and tools for self-awareness like journaling. From that, I then move on to nutrition. And nutrition, as I hope some of you know, I'm mostly a nutritional psychiatrist or known for that, which is around the idea of using food as part of my treatments. And so when I meet you and you're my patient, I want to hear about all the stuff, your development, all your symptoms, all that. But I also want to hear about lifestyle factors like what you eat, how you shop, what your favorite food is part of my mental fitness assessment. So nutrition, seafood, greens, nuts and beans, and a little dark chocolate. Don't forget the rainbows and the fermented foods. That's my nutrition advice, where you're trying to base your foods in these categories, food categories that have more nutrient density. Why do we recommend leafy greens have more nutrients per calorie than any other food category? So after nutrition, we think about movement. The tenet of movement is to try to really get you to love your body in motion and to think about your body, especially as you're aging, as really having probably some different requests for you than what you're seeing on Instagram or from a lot of the influencers. When we listen to influencers, we need to lift to get strong, and that's a part of it, right? We need to maybe like have endurance and be tougher and like, oh, okay. But as I'm aging, what really is appealing to me is like stretching my hips, um, walking a lot more, making sure my hydration status, right? There's a way that I'm moving my body in a little bit more careful ways, a little more joyful ways, a little more intentional. So movement, I tell the story in the book of a woman who I'd been asking to exercise. I was treating her for depression, asking, exercise is so important, some of the best data. She wasn't an exerciser. She came in after I've been treating for years. She came in, she was beaming. Something clearly, I looked at my notes. We changed of medicine. What happened? And she said, I started tango dancing again. I just never understood that I'd never asked her, of course, and she'd been taking tango dance classes for years. She'd fallen off of it and she kind of gotten back into it. It's great exercise, great for socializing, and really taught me about this tenet of movement. I want you to move your body. There's all kinds of ways to do it. After the tenet of movement is sleep, and I get into really in the book, the new science of sleep, talking about how we remove waste from our brain and how our brain cycles through many different things during sleep. Um, After sleep, probably one of the most important tenets for your mental health, I think, is the connection. And I ask people to really map out connections in your life. Who are the people? Who are the institutions? Getting a little detailed. Some of our connections are, mentors. Some are acquaintances. Some are specialists. That person I was thinking about really connected to my plumber these days. I don't know. I just got this great plumber. I've never had a great plumber before, and because there's this great feeling of security here. So thinking about your connections and then also to institutions, right? Something that's very important right now is the whole notion of institutions are kind of shifting. I'm an example of someone who, a lot of institutions made me, whether it was Columbia University, where I learned to become a psychiatrist and was a faculty member for years, or Indiana University Medical School that gave me a very generous scholarship and trained me to be a physician. So thinking about, again, those institutions that matter to you. The next tenet is engagement. It's kind of picking up on that, right? We can map out our connections, but if you don't engage with them, if you don't do something with that, uh, it doesn't help us, right? Mental health awareness doesn't do much for us. Helps us maybe address stigma, but mental health action, right? And that's where mental fitness, I think, was really needed. Is what can we do? What can you do to take action today to better insulate your mental health? And so engagement is really asking us to battle the phone. Part of what the phone is so deadly, the screen time. It's not so much the screen. I think it's the algorithm. It's that when I go to search, I'm not having to think, Drew, what am I really interested in? It's almost like instead of going to the restaurant and first of all picking what kind of restaurant and then looking at the menu, right? What do you want? You want the spinach ravioli? Do you want the lasagna? Do you want the fish of the day? Right? The algorithm just picks for us. Right? It suddenly shows up, and usually we like it, right? Somehow the algorithm knows, like, oh no, it's like you knew. I like it. I like the fish of the day, and so engagement is asking us to take a step away from that and really engage with yourself in a way that is more intentional, that is less digital. I'm not. I try to be very practical about the phone and screen time and all the wonders of things we can do with it.
Did you know that over 80% of the population is deficient in magnesium, a mineral involved in over 600 biochemical reactions? And there are 7 forms of magnesium, each with distinct physiological targets. That's why I take Magnesium Breakthrough from BiOptimzers. It's the only full spectrum formula with all 7 forms. Chelate for muscle recovery, citrate for arterial health, bisglycinate for digestion, malate for energy production, sucrosomial for immune function, taurate for cardiovascular health, and orotate for metabolic optimization. Clinical research confirms that organic magnesiums like citrate and malate have higher bioavailability than the common oxide form found in most supplements. It's fascinating how different forms target specific tissues. For example, taurate, malate, and citrate offer neurological benefits, which have helped me with calmness and focus, not to mention improving my sleep quality. If you want to try Magnesium Breakthrough, go to bioptimizers.com/modern and enter promo code modern10 to get 10% off any order. And if you subscribe, not only will you get amazing discounts and free gifts, you will make sure your monthly supply is guaranteed.
After that is the tenet of grounding, which is about our loss of nature and connection to nature, whether that's more plants in your house or growing a little herb garden this summer, or a real, what I kind of consider a very important piece of a treatment plan these days is very intentional time in nature. I'll ask my patient, tell me about the weekend. And if I just hear inside, inside, busy, 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 I try to not be a jerk, but I try to point out that people need to take better care of themselves these days. And being out in nature, whether it's a walk in the woods, the park, really changes our physiology. It also sets us up. I find that nature is a good place to sit with hard things. And the next tenet 8, is unburdening. And unburdening is the acknowledgement that we as humans all experience trauma. We all carry that in different ways. Some people have experienced really significant trauma. Some of you who are listening haven't experienced a lot, but everybody's experienced some. It can be small traumas, maybe in some ways call them like grief, and then some small quote unquote traumas. I don't know. You lose your favorite relative at a young age. That's not a small trauma. So, there's a lot there. I don't mean to have this little small book and this little chapter like help everyone's trauma more than to acknowledge it's powerful. And if it's holding you back, it's something that if you address, I think you will have more satisfaction with life. And then the last is purpose, the tenet of purpose. When we wake up in the morning with a sense of purpose, you don't need coffee. You don't need an alarm. Everyone listening, those days you wake up and what you've got to do. It has meaning to you. You're unstoppable. And that's one of the things I love about purpose. When you see people get a sense of purpose, I meet a lot of people when they're feeling a little lost in life. And then you see when they get their purpose, it's like this tractor beam, this magnet, right? They start being pulled towards something. And it's incredible for them. That's incredible for your mental health. Some people, some of you listening really know your sense of purpose. You're just kind of, some folks are really good at that. Other people have a little more existential flavor to them. We got to feel like, why am I here? What's it all about? So this little, request in the final tenet is for you to acknowledge that there are some reasons that you're here. And for some people, those are in spiritual terms. For some people, those are in terms of service. For some people, your purpose is a very internal and personal thing. But I ask everyone to reflect on it as a way for us to stay connected, motivated, and engaged with ourselves.
Yes, and yeah, as you get older, the purpose changes, sense of purpose, and maybe it was tied up with work earlier. So there's like grounding and unburdening are things that those generally do not come up in kind of aging talk. When we're talking about longevity, like the blue zones, like connections and purpose and the nutrition, that these come up a lot. But the grounding and the unburdening,
I
and certainly,
appreciate you recognize that, Richard. I think it's because I'm a psychiatrist.
yeah,
And so I think that, and I think it's also part of my wanting to extend my work as a nutritional psychiatrist of talking about what we call lifestyle psychiatry, right? The classics of exercise and eating well and avoiding substances, sleeping well, engaging in healthy relationships. I wanted to add in a little more psychiatry. And so the idea of unburdening naturally appealed to me. I think probably you're also picking up on this is coming out of a new phase for me in my life. I turned 50 as I was writing this book. I moved to Jackson, Wyoming, which is a very, very active, very natural community. We're sitting right at the entrance to Yellowstone, surrounded by the Teton Mountains. And it's been very healing for me in my middle age to have these places to walk, to have these natural spaces for my wife and my children to explore. And so it's been very powerful for me. Probably in a lot of ways, I experienced that in helping me deal with a lot of unburdening and kind of sort through that. A lot of you listening, as you're in that kind of era of kids getting older and parents also getting older, there's just a lot going on and a lot of big feelings and a lot of hard stuff. And so, those two pieces, though, I think are huge. As we age, if we don't cope with trauma, things tend to get stifled, shut down, avoided. Not that all trauma, I don't want to make it sound trivial. You just like talk about it and it goes away. But, part of understanding trauma, whether you have, a really complex PTSD or whether you just have had some things that have made you a less trusting person, um, the conversation I think helps us understand how they are in our lives and where they might be showing up. And then the natural spaces is just, I don't know, I get a kick out of how I feel in them. I think it's like I think it's kind of wild. You get like when I was a kid, we used to take these camping trips to the Smoky Mountains, and like everybody gets a little feral, even the adults, right? All of a sudden they're like a little more fun, and I just always noted that. I think got curious about some of the neuroscience of it. That there's stuff in the forest, these phytoncides that the trees excrete that kind of tamp down or kind of help regulate our immune system a little bit better. There's all these negative ions that for some people really kind of like that, that forest smell kind of boosts your mood. Almost the same mechanism as the ions on the beach. When you go to the beach and you get that like, wow, expansive feeling. Part of that is the way those kind of ions are there from the waves crashing on the shore. So I also like these, and like you picked up on it, Richard, as people are aging because they also become more a part of our lives. There's no way to age without experiencing trauma. All of us have lost friends unexpectedly. All of us have had scares of illness. You don't have to have a horrible medical illness to have a scare with a medical illness, and it really is quite eye-opening at our age. So I also think it's a period in our lives often where people have a little bit more freedom, a little bit more choice, some of our earned wisdom in this life, we know how to navigate it a little bit better. And that means we have more opportunity for some of the things that I find a lot of us love as we age, a little more travel, a little more maybe, slower travel, not the frenzy that we've been on trying to cram it in, a little, more time to sit and savor things. And so I think that's one of the other reasons I felt grounding was very important to be in the book. As we think about mental fitness, it's, as I say in the book, it's always there. It's always there. Nature is always around you. You are nature. Everything around you is nature. You don't have to go out and be in the Teton Mountains. Those are great. They'll overwhelm you, very powerful. But, I've had incredibly powerful experiences in state parks all over the country, or just, sitting on a park bench observing, some birds enjoy the rights of spring and summer.
what do you see for older people as one of the as the major risks? And do you see that they are unwilling to admit that they may not be doing things correctly?
Not a lot. I mean, I don't find a lot of kind of that almost like stubbornness. Probably it's because when people come to see me, there's a note, often there's a problem and some
Mm.
changes need to happen. I find people struggle with change, and especially when people are struggling with their mental health. If you have a really bad depression, it makes motivating and planning and feeling good about stuff quite challenging. So that makes it hard when I'm like, hey, you want to make some pesto and some white beans tonight? And how about a little wild salmon? It's sort of, if you're having a lot of what we call anhedonia, not enjoying stuff, sometimes those recommendations are almost insult to injury. It's like, no, I don't want to eat my favorite meal and not taste it again. Thanks. Like that's not actually very helpful. But my sense is as we are aging, the danger of not engaging in our mental fitness really is, as I said earlier, we kind of are at risk to end up quite, I would say isolated. It's a time in life where a lot of people slow down physically, and that leads to usually to some more weight gain. There's like the tenet of engagement for a lot of us that really is a part of it is about our health care. As I talk to my patients in their 70s and 80s, they like to joke, like, okay, another doctor's appointment. Like, you're just another one on the list where, we can avoid our health, especially men. A lot of men don't go to the doctor, don't get annual labs, don't treat easy things like high blood pressure, or sleep apnea, one of the top killers, or depression, very common thing not to be treated in men, alcohol use disorder. So, engagement really, again, it asks for us to be more engaged, less passive in our process.
Are there telltale signs that you would need help? How would you find out that you needed help? I mean, does it, because, I would think that unless I was like clinically depressed, and I don't even actually know what clinically depressed would be, but I guess suicidal, I would not think to go to a doctor. Um, so,
I know it's
any
sort of the problem,
telltale
problem, right?
signs?
You have no way to engage with your mental health then, or no sense of how to do it with, it doesn't have to be medical support, but like, uh, with scientifically informed support. Right? There's no way for you to access it unless you have symptoms that you probably would want to admit to anyone. In terms of your question earlier, it's great for everybody listening to know how do we know that we're actually clinically depressed? You don't actually have to be suicidal, right? There are 9 core symptoms of depression. And I always tell patients, like, if you have 2 or 3 of them really badly, it's not like I'm going to not diagnose you, right? What I'm interested in is what the symptoms are. Classic symptoms of depression, insomnia or sleeping too much. So disturbances, changes in sleep, changes in appetite, changes in weight, irritability, hopelessness, low mood, thoughts of suicide or not wanting to be here anymore. Probably 1 or 2 more that I'm forgetting right now. But those are some core symptoms of suicide. People are often surprised. They see things like irritability, especially in men. A lot of times, depression in men presents much more as kind of shut down affectively, right? Not expressing a lot of emotion, grumpy, irritable, not sleeping well, drinking too much alcohol. Very classic presentation for male depression, usually with some suicidal thoughts in there. Um, that's how I hope helps people know. My other litmus test is like you're not feeling well, like sad, tearful, down, and it's messing up your life. Is messing up your life meaning that like you don't go out with your friends like you used to, or you didn't put in for that promotion, or you take a lot more sick time at work, or you don't really enjoy your favorite hobby anymore. Ooh, that was a symptom I missed, Richard. Anhedonia means it's a loss of pleasure. And this is a horrible symptom of depression because you're like trying to do your favorite things to feel better, go to the gym, call your best friend, and you just literally your nervous system just doesn't enjoy it. You don't take pleasure. And it's really disturbing. Really disturbing symptom. So those are some of the symptoms of depression. Part of the impetus for writing Healing the Modern Brain is wanting to move mental health from a like, hey, 1 in 5 people have mental illness, get help. And seeing like the grim statistics, like more than half of adults don't ever get any treatment. 80% of men don't who have a mental health disorder don't ever receive any treatment. And just saying like this is not going to get us there. This is a system of denial. It's a system, Richard, that pretends that somehow, right, you and I would not have a incredibly productive, I'm going to say 3 to 5 hours of conversations about how to optimize your mental health over the next 3 decades of life for you. Very quickly hearing about you, your life, what's going on, your professional, kind of details, a little bit about your family, a little bit about your development and who you are. And if you're just honest about, what's going well, what you're struggling with, what your goals are, what you're worried about, oh boy, we're off for the races thinking about mental fitness now. And I think so many people would like to have that conversation, but it's like surrounded in the stigma of mental health. It's where you can see like coaching has gotten really big. And a lot of coaching is kind of soft mental health, where you're helping people be accountable, you're helping people increase self-awareness and think about themselves and set goals. And when they don't achieve them, get curious as to what's in the way. And so, I think as you're noting, a lot of people aren't maybe going to hear about some of this if we only think about mental fitness being for people who have mental health problems or mental health challenges. And I really think mental fitness is for everyone, just like physical fitness is for everyone. There is something for you in it, and the more time and attention you spend on it, the healthier you'll be. And that's, I think, probably my conviction as a psychiatrist. I find that when people attend to their mental health, yeah, it's quite impressive what happens.
So if I want to look at my physical health, I can go and get my blood markers done, right? And I get like a panel and I can see, and then I can say, oh, these are wrong. I need to do something. So is there a way that we can take an inventory of our mental health? I mean, how would
Yep.
someone get started?
Well, there are a couple ways. We can go over a few questions. I have a mental fitness assessment quiz on my website, ramseymd.com, that people can take, easy to find. I've also got like a brain food quiz. But, I would say that there's the broad brush stroke. First of all, everybody listening, if you got a little chill in your spine and some things came into your mind that are a challenge to your mental fitness right now, that's great. I think it also challenges this idea Richard has of like, oh, how do we know? It's like, you know, you know. I find that people are very smart. Actually, in the book, people are very smart about their mental health, I find, but they're also often in denial. In the book, I write about a tick that I've seen in my practice. Increasingly, people will come and they'll sit down and they will tell me an absolutely wonderfully detailed accounting of their mental health, the challenges, some of the problems, even some of the solutions. And then they'll look at me and be like, oh, I don't know, doctor. Like, what? You, you just like, so much. You just spelled it all out. You maybe need a little help seeing that and having confidence in that, but And so actually one of the places where I ask people is if you see yourself saying, I don't know a lot, if you really just do a 180 pivot, I really know that. It's quite helpful. And see what you know. See if you can own it. As a psychiatrist, I tend to look at work and love. It goes all the way back to Freud. Freud said psychoanalysis is a treatment that cures problems of work and love. And it's kind of, I don't know, it's like a very basic notion of the most important areas of functioning, but you just see it over and over again. Someone loses their job, especially, middle-aged men lose their job. Oh, it's like horrible for the mental health, right? Because work and professional status is so important. Love, I mean, there is no antidepressant like human relationships. It's amazing. I've seen some of the worst sort of mental health situations, and someone like that Bumble date worked out, and you see them the next week, and I'm like, how you doing? They're like, oh man, wow, I'm like better. I'm good. What what happened? And it's like, I'm not saying that, that's the only thing we need, but having companionship, being cared for, being attended to by our partners, being known and loved, there's nothing like that for our mental health. And so again, that's easier said than done. People are finicky, tricky, annoying, don't listen well, smell bad in the morning. I mean, there's all kinds of challenges to having human love in your life. But again, if that's something that, you've been struggling with in a passive way, and not really thinking about what's in your way, not really maybe engaging with someone, a therapist, dating coach, friend. I don't know. I think that I think that when we aren't honest with ourselves about accounting for our mental fitness and going through these tenets and thinking about your relationship with them. Self-awareness. Are you a self-aware person? Do you engage any activities to increase your self-awareness? Where do you get feedback? What processes and ideas are you in the midst of improving right now? Yeah, maybe it's none. Again, okay, a great opportunity. Whether it's maybe journaling a little bit or whether it's just, calling a friend and checking in. There's lots and lots of ways for us to increase our self-awareness. And so I think that's, really looking through the tenets and not feeling overwhelmed. But if one really, usually when I'm speaking to people, something kind of appeals. The nutrition jumps out, or the grounding jumps out, or unburdening. And so I feel that it's a little like there's a little self-selection that naturally happens for people.
Right. So kind of looking through and then picking the low hanging fruit is which one am I worst at? And okay, well, work on that. And then,
Yeah, and also
and
low-hanging fruit of interventions, right? If you haven't
yeah,
eaten an avocado in a while, everybody in the brain health space and mental health space thinks an avocado is good for you. If you don't have a big jug of olive oil, like get a big jug of olive oil and go through it in the next 2 weeks, sauteing lots of vegetables, right? There's low-hanging fruit and then there are low-hanging actions, right? It's like it's easy after dinner tonight to go walk around the block and note how you feel. It's super. It takes 10 minutes to write a page in a journal and see what comes up. Like, so, there's a lot that's, I think one of my fears with this book is it would seem like, oh, it's complex. And it's like mental health can be very complex, but mental fitness is a very straightforward set of activities, some knowledge, some ideas to really, again, have us engaged in taking care of our mental health.
what would you see is so if you were going to suggest that people do one habit, so just start one habit, what would be kind of the best habit?
Mm. Boy, I mean, I'm biased, Richard, because I have not been a huge journaler in my life, like like consistent here and there, like travel journals. I have a lot of fun travel journals. But I've really enjoyed the journaling here in the last maybe 3 or 4 years. My late 40s and early 50s, I found something different about it. I found, maybe I found the pen and the journal that really works for me and the timing. So I think that's a wonderful thing because also it's so clear. Anybody who journals knows, right? Like right now, I can't remember. I think my last entry was like 2 weeks ago. I feel really badly. And so, but you open it up and you're like, wow. It's been 2 weeks since I've just had, what, 10, 20 minutes to just sit with myself and my thoughts and write about it. How's that happen? How did everything else get so important? So I really like the journaling. I love people focusing on some new food categories. So whether that's fermented foods or just getting more plants. So about 70, 80% of people don't meet the recommended daily allowance for fiber, which is oddly one of the most important nutrients as we're getting older and as we're thinking about mental health. We didn't talk much about this, Richard, but in the book, I really try and help everyone sync with the kind of new modern lens of neuroscience. That as we're thinking about our mental health, we want to be thinking about the process, what's called neuroplasticity, that our brain naturally grows and repairs itself. So, what can we do to best support that process? And I think the answer is mental fitness. We have an inflammatory system. We have an immune system, right? It's regulated or it's not. There are things that you can do, usual suspects, sleep well, avoid certain toxins and allergens. They're just going to better regulate your immune system, eat fermented foods. And then the last it lends is this idea of the microbiome that, there are a lot of live bacteria living in our gut, and it has actually quite a huge impact on our health and our mental health, primarily through the inflammatory system. And so, those are all, I think, fun new ideas for us to kind of hold on to as we think about. I use those really for motivation. As I'm eating the seafood and the avocados and stuff, I really, I like feel like, yeah, I'm making those choices to really improve the neurotrophic factors that kind of keep my brain growing and repairing itself. So those are, I think some of the, you know, uh, places to start, actions, and some of the ideas of how this appeals to people.
Just going back to journaling for a second. So if I haven't journaled before, suppose, uh, and you start with a blank sheet, what is
Hmm.
it? What question is it you ask yourself? What am I? Am I writing about what I did? Am I writing about what I think? What am I writing about?
I mean, I'm a neurotic psychiatrist, Richard, so I try to write about my struggle and my pain and get it out on the page so I can see it as much as I can. And I try to use it just like I ask my patients to use my office here. It's the place for the conversation you don't have with other people. People say, like, what are you, my friend? It's like, definitely not. I'm like, it's a great quote by a psychoanalyst, Otto Kernberg. Psychotherapy begins where friendship ends. Not that we're not friends or friendly, it's just a conversation that isn't about you being with your friend. It's about you being with your therapist. Where to start with journal prompts? Well, first of all, Richard, you're really setting me up here. There are lots of prompts in healing the modern brain because I find a lot of people don't journal. It's like, what do I write? It's like, Dear Diary, like today was okay. I had an avocado sandwich, like the brain food doctor said. Right. So there are lots of prompts, and I think depending on what you're wanting to do, I think a lot of people start journaling with a little bit of just catching up. Like I like to write a little bit about my kids because when I look back in my journal, I like to see the details of those memories that then bring the whole thing back. That time we were in the minivan and it was -20, or that time that, the dog did this or that. And so I like to get some of those details just about my life. And then I generally move towards things that I'm trying to sort out, aspirational ideas, parts of my personality, maybe that I'm seeing, things that I'm upset with myself for. I find it a really good spot to kind of have a more honest, maybe kind of raw conversation with myself sometimes. And there's something about the writing it down for me and kind of writing it down in my handwriting that helps me with it, processes it in some way that's different than my typing it, at least for me. So lots of prompts in the book, again, ranging from aspirational. There's some prompts in the unburdening chapter, asking people. That's a great way to sometimes work through certain types of trauma, especially grief and loss, is to write to the person about the person. So, and then I just think you'll see. That's the great thing about journaling and writing is none of us knows what's going to fill the blank page. You never know. And that's one of my favorite things is that you'll get to something. Like I got to this place. It ended up, I just wrote a piece for CNBC. It's up there about my move to Wyoming. And there's a little line in there that no one's coming to save you. And it came right from a journal entry where I was sitting and I was like, wondering about all these people that I'd been reaching out to and this and that. And I just had this like real clarity. Right? This is for me to sort out. Like no one's coming to save me on this. Like this, and it was like so calming. So settling. Like stop frantically looking around. And so I find those are the types of things when I'm really in a good spot journaling that I'll get. Some of my patients like call it a nugget. It's like a little gift from the grand unconscious, a little line, a little phrase that just kind of sticks, rises above the other words and clarifies something for you. So those are some of my thoughts on journaling. And I also want people to know, I struggle with it. I don't want you to think like I wake up in the morning and I'm like, oh, I can't wait. Sometimes, recently, I've had a little bit of almost like an addiction feeling. Like I'll wake up and I'll feel like I get my coffee and I'll say hi to my wife and I'll let the dog out and I'll have this feeling of like, like something like I got this need. And it's like, oh, I've got to go sit down and write a few pages. It's really, I don't know. I've never had that happen until recently. So those are my long-winded thoughts on journaling, Richard.
Now that sounds excellent. And yes, there's
Do you
nobody
do
coming.
you do you journal at all, Richard? Have you try, you like, you don't like? How's it go for you?
I do journal, mostly around thinking about, yeah, what I need to do to improve. It's these are my tasks. This is how I need to get better. Um,
Yeah, it's also I think a very kind of performance-based journaling, which I think, is where a lot of us use it, or think about it. I think especially men, right? Because it's all about like performance improvement. And I also think there's a way, so for example, if you were my patient, I'd be wondering what other types of writing slip in there. Like it's performance about work. It's not performance about like your relationship with God or how deeply you love or like how good your chocolate avocado mousse is, right? So, there's probably a specific performance. I'm making a judgment, I'm guessing. Whereas, that word isn't getting used for us. And I think it's an aspect of mental fitness where our relational performance, or as I say to my patients often when they're parents, like and part of this is about growing a bigger heart and you're just being asked to love in a way you've not ever been asked to love before. And some of it's innate, but some of it's not. And so, yeah, so if you I were working with you, I'd take that journaling habit and I'd wonder about what happens if some paragraphs get added, what happens, I'd kind of look for parts of your process that would lend to some really interesting journaling for you, I bet.
Thanks. Yes, intention, setting intention. It's the intention for the day. So connection, engagement, grounding, and unburdening. Are how well you do at these, are these linked to like dementia? Is there any way that we can see
Oh yeah.
how they're linked and what the outcome is for dementia?
For sure. So first of all, there's this really big link between depression and dementia. The number one thing you can do to prevent dementia in your life is take care of, treat, and ideally prevent depression. It's a very sort of more than doubles the risk of dementia. There's probably a lot of different reasons and mechanisms from that, ranging from, you have a low appetite, so you eat less food, so you have a lower B12 level. B12 level just makes your brain shrink faster. Certain things like having a hobby, simply having a hobby decreases the risk of depression by 30%. And, also having a hobby usually keeps you cognitively engaged. So those are like two ways that you're just battling dementia and dementia risk through engaging with mental fitness, right? Having a more kind of active, engaged life. Movement. And I think, again, moving from exercise where it's like, oh, I like it. I find some of my patients really engage with it. But I find often there's this kind of bimodal distribution of people who are exercising a lot or in a phase in their life where they're exercising a lot, and then where they're kind of not, sort of sedentary or really active. And I'm trying to, I think, have people thread the needle more of just, walk more, carry your bags in the airport more, get up and just walk as much as possible. If you want to exercise, great. I love it when people exercise, but I also just think the more we can be with our bodies, in our bodies, enjoying our bodies, the better. Yeah. So all types of movement are welcome, including hanky panky. I mean, that's a great exercise, especially as we're getting older. It's one of those things that I was surprised as a young psychiatrist that people kept like having sex in their 60s and 70s and even 80s. I treat some octogenarians and, oh boy, spicy. It's great, inspiring to hear about, but one of those things again that I don't know, some people don't talk about. Some people have had some disruption in their intimacy, maybe you've had kids in your life, and again, something really to engage in and try and enjoy.
Keep the dementia down. I guess dementia goes, I mean, it goes across the tenants as the like each one of them
I
impacts
think
it.
so. You sleep better, right? You're clearing. So the sleep is really fascinating. There's a system in the brain that wasn't discovered until 2014 called the glymphatic system. And the glymphatic system is how our brain drains out waste. Think about waste is a big, the brain is a big engine. It uses a lot of fuel. Anything that burns a lot of fuel creates a lot of exhaust. Well, we never think about that with the brain. It burns a fifth of all of the fuel, right? So imagine like a fifth of your dinner plate, and that goes to your brain. Well, then what happens? Where's all the waste go? Well, it goes through the glymphatic system. The glymphatic system is most active when we're sleeping. I think it's stage 3 sleep where it's the most active. That makes a big difference if you have 3 or 4 sleep cycles as opposed to two. And so that attending to sleep, attending to nutrition, keeping your body moving, even self-awareness. Right? I know, for example, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 years ago, I was drinking more alcohol. My weight had started going up. I don't know. I was in like a little frosty mood pre-pandemic. I don't know. Wasn't eating as well as I should. Without self-awareness, I probably would still be in that state. With self-awareness, getting kind of paying attention to the feedback I was getting, seeing that I was not feeling my most energetic and a little sadder. Yeah, I made a bunch of changes. I lost the weight, I stopped drinking alcohol, I started eating more plants, started eating more seafood, started really watching my daily ice cream bender and trying to keep it reasonable and not daily. Right? So I think, if we really want to battle dementia risk, we really want to age in a healthy way. Some people are lucky, it just happens. They're like perky, optimistic, athletic, wonderfully connected people. That's not me. Like I try, but that's not me. I need more help. I need more framework. I need more instructions. And so I hope Healing the Modern Brain helps people, gives you some targets, asks you to really value some of these tenets and agree with me. I mean, who's going to disagree that sleep is not amazing for our brain and really important? Who's not going to agree that going out with your friends for an amazing dinner of healthy food and having great connected conversation is just like one of the best human pleasures out there? And so, again, I hope the book helps people age and fight dementia, with these tenets. I think they're, yeah, as you say, dementia risk decreases written all over all of them, really.
Yes, and I like the book in that it's actionable and as a way of thinking about, okay, so I need to be intentional about each one of these and to think about because yes, I mean, we're intentional about exercise and we're intentional about eating. That kind of makes sense, but self-awareness and engagement and grounding and like being intentional across the board is something that I think would be very helpful.
I hope so. I think it also is where it takes us, one of the things that I try to be very aware of is how much I enjoy being on my phone. Because I think that, there's a way that we act like, oh, it's so bad, it's horrible. Screens at night, it's so horrible. And then, we're all in our phone in bed, and there's this almost like, cognitive dissonance that we get very okay with. And so, I think us, really self-awareness helps me see that. It helped me the other day where my son was like playing in the backyard and I was feeling this need to go do something. And I was horribly embarrassed when I was really honest and self-aware. I was feeling the need to go check Instagram. It was like horrible, but it allowed me to make the right choice because I know at the end of every weekend, I'm very hard on myself. I think through what did I do? How many minutes? How many activities? How much time and attention I have younger kids, did I spend on them? And how much time did I spend wrapped up in my own BS? And so I know for me, in that moment, having that self-awareness, be like, hell no. I'm turning around, I'm getting in the backyard, I'm going to get some game going because I know it's going to lead to me feeling great. I know Sunday night that when I do my accounting, I'm going to be like, nope, that was a good choice. That was a great couple hours. And so I guess again, is that going to help me fight off dementia? I think so. I think though that self-awareness helps me have a shot at having better relationships as I age. It helps me feel good that I'm making more intentional choices according to my values. And then it allows me to, when I do enjoy my Instagram, not have to feel as guilty about it because like, I picked the phone over, I don't know, like my wife or like my work. It was actually an intentional choice during some free time.
Excellent. And on that note, so the book is available on Amazon, basically everywhere. And you have some previous books which are more on nutrition and
Yeah,
how
I've got them here.
important
There's
that
a new
is.
one, Healing the Modern Brain. It's well
All right.
everywhere. The one before that was Eat to Beat Depression and Anxiety, which is a 6-week plan to really use nutritional psychiatry, which is again this idea of how food affects our mental health. And then Eat Complete. This was the first nutritional psychiatry cookbook. It's 100 recipes made out of the top foods in terms of containing the 21 most important nutrients for mental health. So, like, let's take you know, a nutrient like mineral like potassium. Right? Like, I find a lot of us, like, besides a banana, like, what are your favorite potassium foods? So not a lot of people rattle off like, oh, white beans and potatoes, love those, right? Raisins. I didn't. I couldn't sort of do that before I wrote the book. But I found if you take those top foods and you combine them, you now have the most nutrient dense recipes possible, right? Because we've used the foods, the raw ingredients that have the most nutrients per calorie for brain health. And so that's really how a lot of my work has been, is really about nutrient density. And for mental fitness, I think it's a similar idea applied to your sleep, your relationships. Like, what's the real nutrient dense part? What's the part that really gives us like a lot of bang for buck? And I really, I hope people will embrace the book. I'd love to hear how it helps you, how it changes anything in your life, anything that really resonates. And, I hope people make good use of it.
And websites, anywhere else, anywhere people can go for further info.
I'm easy to find. I'm drewramseymd.com is my website. I'm Drew Ramsey MD on Instagram. I run my own Instagram account. Everyone, so give me a follow. You DM me, you get me. I've got some great e-courses on my website and a free newsletter, Friday Feels, where we summarize some of the great new science, but also give you some recipes and some mental fitness tips. And there's an e-course, Healing the Modern Brain, as well. So please check out all those resources on my website. But Richard, I've gotten old, and honestly, I just have one simple request of everybody. I'd love you to check out the book. Of course, I'd love you to buy the book, but I really honestly have one request. It's like price of admission for this talk in my mind, which is that you do something with the information. That you, whether it was me saying white beans and pesto, or whether the journaling prompts really excited you, or whether when we said grounding, you saw that park that's close to your house, but you just haven't been to for weeks. It really would mean the most to me is if this conversation helps you take some action and do something for your mental fitness. And so thank you so much, everybody. It's an honor to get to be in your ear and to get to talk with you about really the most important asset you have, your mental health. And Richard, thank you so much for hosting and helping us all think more about the things we really have to do. And as I said earlier, we have so much new information and things we can do to take care of our mental health as we age. I really appreciate you having me on and thinking about such an important topic.
Thank you, Dr. Ramsey. It's been great talking to you.